Okay, everybody, I wanted to make a quick video here because in testing for an upcoming budget gaming laptop roundup, we ended up finding some very, very odd results because some of the laptops that we had were performing exactly as expected, but other ones, some of them that I have here, were performing well under expectations. We found out what was going on, and it's something that you guys need to know about before you take the plunge into any budget gaming laptops. So what's going on here? Let me explain. So this is a Strix G16 with a 9955HX and an RTX 5050. This one to the right of me is the exact same setup, but it has an RTX 5060. Now, let's open them up to see what's going on here. So the 5050 model, if you open this up and you check right under here in the memory, you see the typical dual DIMMs. So two 8GB modules, which gives you a total of 16 gigabytes of memory. Very, very traditional setup, right? Then on the higher end, several $100s more expensive RTX 5060 model, let's open up this guy. This one was underperforming based on our expectations. What do we have here? Well, it actually locked itself. Under the kimono, we've got only one DIMM, only one stick of memory, one 16 gigabyte stick of memory. We found a couple of other models that had the exact same thing going on. The Lock 15, the latest generation model, which I don't even know if it's out yet. What do we have under here? The memory is hidden under this. Well, we have a single 16 gig module. So how do you know what you're actually getting? Well, with Lenovo, it's indicated on their PSRef site, a website I'm willing to bet most people don't even know exists, but it's amazing for decoding Lenovo product numbers. But the single channel operation isn't indicated anywhere on their main website. People would need to puzzle it out for themselves. Single channel models like the one I have here have the capacity listed, whereas models with two memory sticks in dual channel mode will say 2 by whatever each module's capacity is. ASUS, I gotta say this, they confuse things even more, but at least they're a little bit more transparent. Basically, the number you see on their website isn't the actual capacity installed in the laptop. Rather, if there's a 2 multiplier at the end of all of this text, it's 2 modules. So in this case, it's a pair of 8 gigabyte modules totaling 16 gigs. Whereas if there's just the capacity without the by 2 like this one, it's a single module running in single channel mode. And yeah, sure, it might sound like I'm picking on Lock and ASUS here, but this is a problem that permeates the entire industry, and the transparency varies wildly from one manufacturer to another. Omen basically shows everything you would want to know about their memory layouts. The same thing goes for MSI. And Acer, well, good luck even finding their laptop specs in most cases. But when you do, the memory layout isn't clear whatsoever. As for Gigabyte, well, I'm guessing they're hoping stores will actually list what's being offered. And talking about those retailers, well, that opens up a whole other can of worms, guys, because it seems like for them, the less you know about a device, the better. And that goes for memory too, because even laptops that we know are using single or dual channel layouts, they don't get any mention whatsoever. And that's a big issue, right? Because like it or not, this is where most buyers get their information from, and there's a complete and utter lack of transparency here. I hope this changes in the future because it really, really pisses me off, and it should piss you off too. But you might be asking yourself right now, right? With all of these things open here in front of me, how bad could it possibly be? Well, it was bad enough that we red flagged a lot of these things because, like I said, they were not performing up to our expectations. But how bad is this situation in actuality? So what we did is we tested these laptops in their out-of-box single DIMM 16 gigabyte config and with a dual 8 gigabyte setup at the same frequency and latency. So let's start with the Lock 15's real-world performance, and the impact between dual and single channel setups varies wildly. In some apps like Blender and Handbrake, there's no perceptible difference. Meanwhile, the dual 8 gig system is quite a bit faster in Houdini Resolve and Premiere Pro render outputs. But step into high-level photo editing with Photoshop and Lightroom, and the single 16 gig setup just gets pounded right into the ground like no one's business. Moving on to the Strix G16, and it seems like the 9955HX is a lot more forgiving towards the 1x16 gig setup than the Lock 15's Ryzen 7 270, which is based on the older Zen 4 architecture. Or maybe AMD's flagship 16-core 32-thread CPU is simply able to brute force itself past most of those memory bottlenecks. Either way, there's still some minor performance drop-offs ranging from imperceptible in heavily multi-threaded apps to noticeable in Resolve and Premiere again. And yet, Photoshop and Lightroom see the biggest uplifts with the dual channel config. It's nothing like the lock, but there's certainly performance being left on the table with ASUS's out-of-box setup versus a more traditional dual channel layout. But I'm sure what is in everybody's head right now is how do those single channel setups actually affect the overall gaming performance? It turns out the negative effects are highly variable. In games that are more CPU limited like CS2, Rainbow Six, Hogwarts, and Baldur's Gate, the two 8GB modules we installed gave about a 5 to 10% average frame rate improvement over Lenovo's out-of-the-box setup. But other games, well, their results were essentially tied. And if you look at those 1% lows, those tell a very different story, with every single title showing at least some benefit for dual channel memory, and others actually seeing a pretty significant uptick in overall frame rates. However, I need to mention this, right? No one, and I mean no one, would notice a difference between the out-of-box setup and the dual channel one here. The G16 saw about the same effects, but to a lesser extent. Of course, there's still a few CPU-bound instances where the stock setup falls a little bit behind, but overall, it's a wash between these two different memory layouts. This is likely because most were hitting GPU limitations on the RTX 5060 long before that powerful 9955HX CPU even really steps in. And look, I don't have a problem here with the performance because in a lot of situations, it's imperceptible. Yes, the single channel configuration will get you less performance than the dual channel one overall, but in a lot of cases, you're never really gonna notice it yourself as a regular user or as a gamer. And to be perfectly transparent with you, there's even an upside to having this single channel memory layout on these laptops. It gives people a clear path to upgrade their memory without much trouble whatsoever, and also save a little bit of money while doing it. Like here in Canada, you can find a single 16GB SODIMM for about $100, which would bring any of these laptops to a solid dual channel 32GB standard. But even knowing this, I keep asking myself, why buy a brand new laptop knowing you'll need to upgrade it literally right away? Personally, I'd much rather have every bit of performance that'll fit into my budget from day one. And speaking of budgeting, look, this is a whole other section of this video. Manufacturers have started to do some utterly wild things to their specs in order to get 2025 RTX 5000 series gaming laptops down to, I guess, what you would call like an acceptable price for most consumers. Because for the most part, up until this point, these things have just not been selling up to expectations. And they're doing that even if it means pairing them with older CPUs like Intel's 13th gen and AMD's Zen 4 architecture, which isn't actually that bad if you think about it. Since if you don't care about battery life all that much, this is a great route to save a few $100s while getting a current generation GPU. And there's a few other things that you're gonna wanna watch out for on these budget laptops too. And one of those, believe it or not, yes, even now in 2025, is connectivity. Some of that is because these older generation processors that these companies are using to bring the cost down, well, they don't support every single modern connectivity standard. The other issue is that some of these companies are simply penny pinching. Like the Gigabyte Gaming A16, it only has a single USB-C port, and that's rated at just USB 3.2 Gen 1 speeds, so 5 gigabits per second, and all the other USB Type A ports run at that speed or even less. And the Lock 15 that I have right here in front of me, well, it does things actually a lot better. It has, yes, only a single USB-C port that's backed up by, I swear, a ton of USB Type A ports. But the benefit of this Type C is that it runs at 10 gigabits per second, which is pretty much more than most people would actually use on a normal basis. Now, on the other hand, the TUF A16 takes things sort of to the next level. This is like the most optimal layout for connectivity that you could have on a more budget-focused gaming laptop. So you have USB Type A's, you have 2 USB Type C's, and another USB Type A. Now, all of these are running at close to the maximum that you could possibly want, but there is a little issue with this device. And it's an issue that translates to many other budget gaming laptops too. The Intel and Ryzen 200 series models get a full layout of modern connectors, up to 40 gigabits per second for Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4, but the Ryzen 8000 series maxes out at just 10 gigabits per second. And another thing that typically plagues these budget gaming laptops, anything in sort of like the $1,500 and under category, is GPU power. And no, I'm not talking about the fact that these get budget GPUs, because let's be honest, anything in this category is gonna get an RTX 5070 or below. No, what I'm talking about here is how much juice is actually being pushed to the graphics subsystem. And that will vary wildly from one manufacturer and one device to another. Basically, NVIDIA rates all their mid to lower tier GPUs at 100 watts with a 15 watt overhead for dynamic boost. But only a few brands actually hit that, even in their absolute highest performance mode under optimal conditions. Acer's Nitro series absolutely doesn't. It tops out at just 70 watts before dynamic boost with an absolute maximum of 85 watts. Gigabyte does the exact same thing with their A16, though we've seen some of their 5050 and 5060 models barely hit 65 watts on a regular basis. The Lock is a bit better with its 5060 hitting an average of 86 watts during our testing, but it's still a long shot away from the tough A16. Now in the back of your head, you're probably thinking, what are you talking about, Mike? 5060 is equal to 5060. It doesn't matter what device it's in. Well, on the desktop side, you'd probably be pretty spot on with that observation. But on the laptop side, power input is the absolute king. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna compare the TUF A16 to the Lock 15 to see what that 20 watts of additional horsepower will actually give you. And yes, more power gives the A16 a definitive advantage in almost every single game, with the only real holdouts, to some extent at least, being Black Myth, Warhammer, and Alan Wake. But even there, the 1% lows get a significant boost upwards with more power. And with all things, including price, being about equal, that makes the A16 a much better gaming device for your money, at least from a raw performance standpoint. Another thing that I wanted to mention while I'm in here is you're gonna notice one thing here, the battery capacity. And look, the vast majority of the industry has moved beyond 70 watt hours. But Lenovo on this device, they only put a 60 watt hour unit. Meanwhile, ASUS, they're going with 90 watt hours. And the differences here between three different capacities are like night and day, guys. Naturally, things like software optimizations play a big part here too. But as a general rule of thumb, if you have more capacity, it's better. But it also depends on how much of a priority battery life is for you before you buy one of these laptops. Screens are something else that's a huge toss-up with these budget gaming laptops. While the vast majority of the industry has moved their mid and upper tier devices to 1610 panels, many less expensive models still use 16:9 layouts, which are typically tied to older panel technologies. But look, older doesn't mean worse, because overall quality in terms of brightness, contrast, and color reproduction, well, it's almost like a game of Russian roulette. You'll find some absolute gems in the least expensive devices, while others are dim and perform terribly, while lacking key features like Advanced Optimus and G-Sync. So I guess the moral of this video is, before you buy a budget gaming laptop, know what you're getting into. Be as savvy as possible with your research. Get to know these things, get to know what you want to buy, because corners are being cut to make RTX 5000 series gaming laptops hit lower price points. And many of those cuts, well, you won't notice them when just glancing at a spec sheet. And as we go into the pre-Christmas holiday shopping season, and of course Black Friday, a lot of these more affordable laptops are going to be heavily discounted. Some are going to be absolutely great deals, others not so much. So if anything, I hope this video will help people ultimately make the right decision and make sure every single last dollar that you might want to spend on a new gaming laptop goes towards things that matter the most. Anyways, I'm Mike with Hardware Canucks. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, guys.